Now we're going to begin this week with Seif Dalet. Seif Dalet is going to begin discussing now, the Mechaber is going to discuss breast milk. So the status of breast milk is that breast milk is pariv. Breast milk for a child, for a baby, is allowed to be consumed directly from the mother. The Ramah on Seif Dalet is going to then make a comment on the Mechaber from Seif Gimel. Okay, the Mechaber in Seif Gimel said that you're allowed, there's no problem of bishul. If you have kosher meat in Seifim milk, what do the Mechaber say? There's no problem of basar b'chalav, even midrabanan. And therefore the Mechaber said it's mutar b'bishul ubahana. The Ramah is going to argue on the Mechaber, and he's going to say, wait a second, bishul, in theory, there is no problem because there's no basar b'chalav, but there is a problem of maris ayin. The Ramah is going to hold that even for treif, there's a problem of maris ayin.
You can still have hana from.
You can still have hana, but he's going to say there's a maris ayin problem. And again, you can resolve the maris ayin problem. But the Ramah is going to say that what the Mechaber said in Seif Gimel, and he said that it's okay to cook treif, that was only me'ikar hadin. That was because the Mechaber wasn't yet discussing the issue of maris ayin. But now that we've introduced the problem of maris ayin, the Ramah is going to say that in Seif Gimel, when the Mechaber said it was only theoretical, and practically, you're not allowed to because of maris ayin. Okay? Once we read the Mechaber, the Ramah inside, we're going to learn the Shach, and that's going to be the first chart. The Shach is going to argue on the Ramah in what the Mechaber holds in Seif Gimel. Okay, now that we have all of this, let's read the Mechaber inside. Here we go. So says the Mechaber that asur levashel b'chalav isha, it is forbidden to cook meat in breast milk mipnei maris ha'ayin, because of what people are going to assume seeing when you're cooking it. However, since it is only a problem of maris ayin, which is dirabanan, but it's not actually milchik, there is a halachic nafkamina that ve'im nafal l'toicha tafshil, if breast milk did fall inside of meat, then the rule is that batel ve'ein tzarich shiur. The breast milk is batel, and you do not need the regular measurement of 60 for it to become batel. Okay, now says the Ramah that b'nira lefizeh, it appears based on this that the kol shekain, how much more so the asur levashel lechatchila b'chalav tameil, that it is asur lechatchila to cook with treifim milk, oy basar tameya b'chalav tahira, or treifim meat in kosher milk. That even though the Mechaber and Seif Gimel said that there's no problem mitzad basar b'chalav, the Ramah says for kol shekin for sure there is a problem in reference to maris ayin. However, v'davka basar behema, the Ramah says that that's specifically a problem when it comes to kosher meat. Aval ba'oif the rabbanon in lachush, but if it's only chicken, which is midrabanan, inside of treifim milk, then there's no problem. Because the Ramah held at the end of Seif Gimel that there is no maris ayin problem when it's only midrabanan. The question at hand that's written is there an issue of maris ayin when cooking with treifim meat or milk? Okay, so the Mechaber in Seif Gimel, bepashtus, since he doesn't bring up an issue of maris ayin, Mechaber himself theoretically holds, no, it's not a problem. However, the Ramah in Seif Dalet that we just read inside, he holds, yes, there is a problem of maris ayin. Shach Zayin argues on the Ramah, and he says that what your kol shekain is not correct. Why? Because the Shach is of the opinion that there is no concern of maris ayin by meat and milk when it comes to the cooking phase. When you're cooking something and your plan is exclusively to cook, not to eat, then there is no maris ayin. And the Shach says that in Seif Gimel, when there was treif mixed into the mixture, will the person ever come to eat it? Of course not, because there's treif mixed in. So when the Mechaber said that mutar bebishul, it's because it's a case where all that you're going to do is cook it. You're never going to come to eat it. You're never going to come to eat it. So the Shach holds that there is no concern for Maris Ayin when you're just cooking something. He says that if someone is watching you, he says there are so many reasons why maybe your cooking is okay. The example he gives is maybe the person who's cooking it is doing it l'tzarech refuah. Maybe there's someone that's sick, and even a choyle she'ein by sakana, that's what the Shach says. They're allowed to cook even the treif that's mixed into it, and maybe the cooking is being done l'tzarech refuah. And therefore, there's no concern of Maris Ayin. There's no concern of Maris Ayin. And therefore, the Mechaber in Sif Gimel, when he says mutter levashel, he means through and through. You're allowed to cook it because there's no problem of basar b'chalav even with Rabbanon, and there's no problem of Maris Ayin. Now, on top of that, very important, the Shach then concludes, following his opinion, that in Sif Dalid, when the Mechaber used the opening words Asr levashel b'chalav isha, the Shach has a huge chiddush. He says that levashel here doesn't mean to cook; it actually means to eat. And he says, because you find sometimes in the Mishnah and sometimes you find in the Poskim where they interchange the word bishul and achila. So here, when he actually said Asr levashel, he actually meant Asr lechel, because the Shach says, he concludes that there is no Maris Ayin problem when it comes to only to cooking. And therefore, when the Mechaber says, by breast milk you can't cook, he actually meant you're not allowed to eat. That's what he actually meant. So it says the Shach that Achin, however, Divrei HaPoskim, the words of the Poskim Shekasvu, that they wrote stama. They wrote plainly, Mutarim bibishol. In the last Seif, they wrote that when you have treif mixed in, it's mutar b'bishul. Again, amongst those people is the Mechaber himself. Mashma, that implies that afilu mishum maris ayin leka. That even from a concern of maris ayin, there is no problem because they wrote mutar. That means that we're not concerned for basar b'chalav and we're not concerned for maris ayin. And v'kach nirim divrei marshal perakal basar. That's what it appears as the words, as the opinion of the Marshal and Perakal Basar. And v'chein mashma das Mechaber. That is also the simple understanding of the Mechaber's opinion. That b'deloi kasav, the fact that he did not write b'chalav, behema, temea, gufa. He did not write in the last sif that when you're cooking treif and meat, the asu mishum marasayin. He didn't write this permitted because of marasayin. So l'kach nearly baru. Therefore, it appears to me the Shach clearly that the shiny hasam. There, in Sif Gimel, it's different. That cave on the Al Kopanim. Since, at least, Echad Mehen Asr B'Achila, one of the two ingredients, either the meat or the milk, which is treif, is Asr B'Achila, that the Vadai B'Bishul L'Chudei, that for sure, when you're only doing Bishul, Leka B'Shum Maris Ayin, there is no problem of only Maris Ayin. Because the Hayach Elias, it's able to be, Shemavashal L'Tzerech Refuah. Maybe the person who's cooking the treif is doing it l'tzarech refuah. Okay, let's just finish one more line of the Shach. That v'hai asur levashel, and that which it says that it is forbidden to cook, he says in this sif, hainu lecho, that means to eat. And v'chein mashakasav ha'mechaber b'sifei, also what the Mechaber is going to write in the next sif, asur levashlam, we're going to learn that case when we read it inside. Al karchach, it must be that sarich nami lefarshel la'achlan. It must be that you're explaining it means to eat. And he says that ukahai gavna matzina but mikra b'mishnah. It's similar scenarios we find in Psukim and in the Mishnah that afke la'achila b'lashin bishul ayin sham. Sometimes you find that they're trying to say eating, but instead of writing eating, they write bishul, and therefore he switches the taich of the actual words of the Mechaber here and of later in Sif Hey. Let's now go and discuss outside Taz Hey. This is the last line of our chart. The Taz Hey says the following. He says, is there an issue of Maris Ayin? So the Taz initially writes that there is no concern of Maris Ayin, but then he says that who am I? He has an interesting lashon. He says, Ein biyadi lahakel l'basha hichme ramah. I don't have it in the power of my hands to be makel more than what the Ramah says. And therefore, he says, since the Ramah here in Sif Dalet says that when there's treif, there is a concern of Maris Ayin, the Taz concludes, yes, there is a problem of Maris Ayin, but that's because he's following the opinion of the Ramah. Okay? And this is the conclusion of the first chart. This gives clarity of all of the different opinions, whether we say Maris Ayin when you're actually cooking treif. So moving now along to Seif Hey. As an introduction to Seif Hey is now going to discuss what happens if a person shechts a chicken and they find inside of the chicken an egg. What's the question? We know that when a chicken lays an egg, the egg that we eat today are parv, right? You make scrambled eggs are parv. The question becomes, if I shecht a chicken and I find an egg inside of the chicken, at what phase of the egg's development inside of the chicken do we say that it becomes its own entity and it becomes parv? Because prior to a certain point, the egg is actually still part of the chicken, and just like the chicken is fleshik, then the egg that's inside of it is also fleshik. So the question midirabana, correct, midirabana. So the question becomes, what exactly is the phase that the egg that you find inside of the chicken is no longer considered to be an extension of the chicken, and therefore it goes from being fleshik to being parv. So in order to understand, we're going to have a lot of opinions. In order to understand the opinions, I just want to give an introduction as to what exactly is the process inside of the body of a chicken. So the way it works is the following. That when a female chicken reaches the reproductive age, then what happens inside of the body is that connected to the basar shedra, the basar shedra means the meat of the spine. Connected to the spine of the chicken, there are clusters of yolks, egg yolks, that begin to grow inside of the chicken. Okay, in Hebrew, we already learned this, I think in Hilchos Shabbos, that we learned it when we were talking about Yoreh. The yellow part of an egg, the first part that gets developed, is called the chelmoin. Okay, and it grows in clusters connected to the spine of the chicken. Now, at a certain point, this yellow part gets detached from the shedra, from the spine, and it moves into the womb of the chicken. Okay? When it's connected to the spine in halacha, that's called mu'ura begidin, that it's still connected with its sinews to the spine of the chicken. Now, after the chicken produces these clusters of the chelmoin, of the yellow, then there comes a phase where it grows around the yellow, the white part of the egg, which is called the chelboin. Then on the white part of the egg, there's something called the klipa daka, which means a soft shell starts growing around the white and around the yellow. And then that soft shell turns into a klipa kasha, becomes hard. Right? And that's the shell that we know the way it is today. That's this process. Now, going back to the mu'ura begidin or in a mu'ura begidin, sometimes the egg becomes disconnected from the chicken when it's yellow, and sometimes it gets disconnected later. Sometimes it already starts growing the white, sometimes it already has a klipa daka. These are two separate things to bear in mind. There is the 4 phases of the development of the actual egg: white, yellow, white, soft shell, hard shell. That's one thing. And another thing is it connected to the ovary or is it not connected to the ovary? Two separate things. And we're going to now have machlokesen between, we're going to have the Mechaber, we're going to have the Ramah, we're going to have the Shach, we're going to have the Taz. Each one of them are going to have a different opinion as to exactly at which stage is the egg considered developed enough that it is no longer considered to be part of the chicken, now considered to be parv. Okay, that is all the intro, and with that, let's read Sifei, the Mechaber inside. So says the Mechaber that beitzim hanimtzaim ba'oifos, eggs that are found inside of a shechted chicken. So im heim gemurais, if they are complete, what is the Mechaber's definition? The Hainu, which means sheyesh lahem, that there is for them chelboin v'chelmoin, they have the white and they have the yellow, then afal pi shehimu ura begidin, even though it is still connected with its sinews to the ovary, even though it's still connected, harei ze gemura, that is considered to be complete according to the Mechaber, and therefore umutar la'achla b'chalav, I can then take that egg and I can eat it with milk. Aval, however, im ein la ela chelmoin, if it only has the yellow, then asur levashlam b'chalav, it is forbidden to cook it inside of milk. That's not enough. It needs to have the yellow and the white to be allowed to do a lechatchila. Aval, however, im achlam bifnei atzmam, if I took this egg that only had the yellow and I ate it by itself, so even though the Mechaber said that I can't cook it with milk, nevertheless, mutar lechol achareim kevino chalav, I'm allowed to eat.
Meaning without waiting.
Without waiting, very good. Without waiting 6 hours. You don't actually become fleshik. If this egg only has the yellow, then according to the Mechaber, I cannot cook it and eat it with milk. But if I only eat this egg by itself, right away afterwards, I am allowed to eat cheese or milk. Okay, now going inside to the second chart, as you see, there is no Ramah in this Seif. Now it's important to note that the Ramah wrote other Svarim. Okay, there's a sefer that the Ramah wrote called Toras Chatos, and there the Toras Chatos did write an opinion as to when it's considered to be developed. And it's interesting, the Shach quotes it. The Shach says that the Ramah didn't write anything in here, but we do know the opinion of the Ramah because of what he wrote in Toras Chatos. So let's go in the chart inside. So the first line is the Mechaber, and he says that lechatchila, what? It must have chelmoin and chelboin. And even if it's me'ura begidin, even if it's still connected, lechatchila, as long as it has chelmoin and chelboin, that's considered to be enough. Now, what does the Ramah in Toras Chatos hold? So he says like this: it must have chelmoin and chelboin, even if it's me'ura begidim. Okay, and Shach Yud, let's go through it in the chart. When are eggs found in a shechted chicken allowed with milk? So lechatchila, the Shach says, only if it has klipa kasha and it's eina me'ura begidim, which is extremely machmir. What about when is it mutter b'diavad? It must have chelmoin and chelboin, and it's eina me'ura begidim. That's even stricter than the Ramah, because the Ramah says if it has in Toras Chatos, he writes if it has chelmoin and chelboin, it's mutter b'diavad. If it's me'ura begidim, the Shach is even stricter. He says it has to be eina me'ura begidim in order to be mutter b'diavad. Then the Shach, however, says in a case of hefsed meruba, which means when there's a big loss, then you could be mekel, and even if it only has chelmoin, and it's me'ura begidim, which is the same case, by the way, as the Mechaber. He says that by a hefsed meruba, you could be mekel and say that it's okay.
So that would mean like someone already cooked with it, and now they're gonna.
And they cooked a lot of it. A lot of got mixed in. They had a lot of these eggs. There's a hefsed meruba if we say that they can't eat it because it was cooked together with milk. That's a new paskin that it's not a problem, according to the Shach. And the Shach concludes with the same minig that the Toras Chatos brought, which is b'makim sheish minig lahachmir, in places when they have a minig to be machmir, even if it has a klipa kasha, still don't cook it together with milk. So Tazvav, again, the scenario is when are eggs found in a shechted chicken allowed with milk? So the Taz, and he quotes also the opinion of the Marshal, they write the following: the Me'ikar Hadin. Ikar Hadin means if you were following strict din, not following minig. He says, even if it has a klipa daka, which is the third stage of the development, it has a soft shell, and it's eina me'ura begidim, and it's not connected with its sinews anymore to the ovary, still me'ikar adin, me'ikar adin, only if it reaches this phase can you cook it together with milk. However, what's the minig lechatchila lahachmir, that even if it has a klipa kasha, even if it has a hard shell, don't cook it together with milk. and minig b'diavad to be mekel, that even if it has a klipa daka, you could be mekel and say that you could have it when it was cooked with milk. Okay, before moving along to the next sif, let's read two shachs inside. We're going to read shach yud aleph and shach yud beis inside. They're both short. So again, how do you identify a shach? The shach has the half a circle, right? So shach yud aleph is going on the words of the Mechaber. The Mechaber said that if you have a egg that only has the yellow, he says that you're not allowed to cook it with milk. So it says this shach is a continuation of the shach that we discussed in the last if. If you remember we said that the shach is of the opinion that sometimes when it says lefashil, it actually means lecho. So the shach here writes, referencing what he said in that shach, that actually the only problem here is not a problem of cooking, it's actually only a problem of eating. So says the shach that kalashin has this exact lashin. Kasav gamkin ho'aterazov, and v'humagumgam. This lashon is actually incorrect because the hal levashel, because cooking pshita deshari. Obviously, you are allowed to cook this egg with milk because the afilu oif gufay. Even if you have an actual chicken, nizbar le'il b'sif gimel. We learned earlier in Seif gimel that chicken and milk that's only midrabanan, you're actually allowed to cook. Mutter b'bishul af midrabanan, you're allowed to cook it even midrabanan. Ella rather, hai levashlam, this that the Mechaber says cooking, ritzonu loymar la'achlam, he actually means eating.
That we said previously, like back in Seif Dalet.
So in Sif Dalid, the Shach already said that sometimes when it says levashel, it means lecho. But the rationale is different. In Sif Dalid, we were talking about Maris Ayin. Here, the Shach is referencing back to Sif Gimel. Sif Gimel, we said that cooking chicken and milk, which is only midrabanan, is mutter b'bishul. So obviously,
Right, so
this egg from the chicken, there's no problem of cooking. The only issue actually had to do with eating. Final Shach Yud Beis. Aval im achlam bifnei atzman. The Mechaber said that if you ate the yellow by itself, clarifies the shach that afilu im heim mu'urim adain be'eshkel, even if they are still connected to the cluster in the ovary, you're still allowed to eat right afterwards milk or cheese. And keinu ba'archas chaim sham. This is also what the Archas Chaim writes there. And umash masham, it implies over there that afilu loy nikbar ella hachelmein, that even if you did not complete, if it wasn't done, the only thing that was finished was that there's the yellow. And v'gam heim uris ve'eshkel, and they are still connected to the cluster. That mutar lecha lachlerin kibino echalav, you're allowed to eat afterwards cheese or milk. Ayin sham, look over there in the Archas Chaim. And upirush mu'uris ve'eshkel, what does it mean? What is the explanation that it's still connected to the cluster? So pirush Rashi explained mechubaris, when they are connected, b'psar hashedra, to the meat of the spine of the chicken. Rabbi Moshe clear? Okay. That is the end of Sif Hey. Okay, I think let's just do now the Mechaber of Sif Vav, and then we will stop and continue with the Ramah of Sif Vav next week. So, I would love to do the Mechaber now because we're actually going to learn in the beginning of the Mechaber Sif Vav a scenario that B'Hashgacha Pratis we learned in Hilchos Shabbos, and that is the following. The Mechaber now is going to discuss what happens if I have meat or milk, and I smoke the meat and milk together, which means they are not cooking and giving flavor to each other directly from the fire. It's that the smoke from the fire is what's cooking it. That's going to be the first case. And the next case is going to be what happens if I cook meat or milk in Chamei Tiveria. Chamei Tiveria is the hot springs of Tiveria. And we learned in Siman Shin Yud Ches, what did we learn? That Chamei Tiveria is Tulas Chama. And we learned that Chamei Tiveria, when you cook in Chamei Tiveria, you're only over at Isra B'D'Rabbanan on Shabbos. Right? So, consistent with that, the Mechaber is going to paskin over here that if someone smokes meat or milk together, or if they cook meat and milk in Chamei Tiveria, then they don't get malchus, meaning they did not violate an Isser De'oraisa. But we're going to learn that there's still an Isser Midrabanan of cooking it in this manner. Okay, that's the first part of the Mechaber. Then the Mechaber is going to discuss 4 new scenarios, and he's going to say that in all these 4 scenarios, you're not going to be over for an Isser D'Oraisa, but there's still a problem with the Rabbanan. What are the 4 scenarios? If I take meat and I cook it with mei chalav. Mei chalav literally means the water of milk, and in English we translate that as whey. And again, Bashkacha Pratis, we already learned about whey in Hilchos Shabbos and Siman Shin Yud Tes. When we were learning about Yoreh, right? And we were learning about separating the curd from the whey, right? If you remember, it was a halach, and we said that even though it's oichel and oichel, so seemingly what's the problem of Yoreh? We already learned that since liquids mix very well together, and if you're going to separate the two, since you're separating liquids, we said liquids, there is a problem of separating, even if it's oichel from oichel, it's a tulda of Yoreh. So we already discussed. So the first case, the Mechaber is going to talk about what happens if I cook meat with whey. Second scenario is what happens if I cook meat from milk that was extracted from an animal after it died. Third scenario is what happens if I cook meat with chalav zachar, which literally means milk from a male.
Yeah, what is that?
And the Shach is going to clarify that we're talking about an animal, a male animal that nishtane mibriyasoi. Hashem created a male animal that it cannot produce milk. Let's say something happened to the animal, something changed in the development of the animal that for whatever reason it does have the ability to produce milk.
Like androgynous?
Maybe. But the Shach is going to say that chalav zachar, even though he uses the phrase generally, it's exclusively talking about a male animal that now produces milk. And the fourth case is if someone cooks meat with blood. That in all these 4 cases, the Mechaber is going to say that you're pater for cooking and eating, and you're not going to get malchus, but there's still a problem midrabanan. Okay? There's a lot more to be discussed that we'll discuss after we learn the Rabbah next week. But this is the general outline. Let's read the Mechaber inside, and we will end it with that. So it says the Mechaber Sivav that Hameushan, if someone smokes meat and milk together, Ve'hamevushal b'chame Tiveria, and if someone cooks meat and milk in the hot springs of Tiveria, says the Mechaber that Ein Loikin Olav, you don't get malchus for doing that because you did not violate an Isser min HaTorah. The Shach Yud Gimel is going to clarify, but there's still an Isser b'Derabanan. And v'chein, so to hamevashel basar b'mei chalav, so to someone who cooks meat in the liquids of milk, meaning in whey, oy b'chalav mesa, or in milk that was extracted from an animal after it died. And again, Shach Yudalit is going to clarify that it doesn't matter if the animal died on its own or you shechted it, it doesn't matter. Or, oy b'chalav zachar, if you cooked meat in the milk that was produced from a male. And again, in Shach, Tez Zayin is going to clarify that this is exclusively talking about an animal. Oy shebishel dam b'chalav, or if you cooked blood together with milk. In all these 4 cases, pater, you're exempt min HaTorah. And ve'ein loikin al achilasi mishum basar b'chalav, you're not going to get malchus for eating it because of the mixture of meat and milk. However, there is going to be a problem midrabanan that we will discuss at more length next week. And we'll end it over here.
Thank you, Rabbi.